And I'm okay just to share my screen as soon as we start?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll just make a brief presentation of you all and then you go.
Thank you.
Elisabeth is here. Okay, good.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So, Teresa, I think we
can start.
Yes.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the second plenary session of the Strings Conference. My name is Teresa and I'm a researcher of the Strings project coordinated by Elisabeth Figueiredo. It is our pleasure to present this group of keynote speakers, the very interesting research and expertise on the topic of promotion of rural food projects and rural territories of provenance, the strategies, activities, and the connections. We thank the three of you for kindly accepting our invitation and contributing to reach this conference. I'll start by presenting our first keynote speaker, Michael Hall from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Michael Hall is a professor in marketing and tourism in the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. He also holds visiting professor positions at Linnaeus and Lan University, Sweden, University of Oulu, Finland, and Taylor's University, Malaysia. He's a co-editor of current issues in tourism and field editor of Frontiers in Sustainable Tourism. He has published widely on tourism, regional development, global environmental change, sustainability, and food and wine. He has a long history of working in food and wine tourism and the problems of rural areas, with his most recent book being The Sustainable Chef. He also has a small farm outside of Christchurch, primarily focused on nut production. So, Michael, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ways of presenting these days. It's ironic presenting in the middle of the night, the other side of the world from a farm about food issues, but clearly it's extremely important. What I would like to do today is pose some questions about the different relationships we have between the farm, the rural and the city, and how they are related and why, and their implications. I think clearly the country and the city have always been connected, but in recent years, maybe the last 50 in particular, these relationships have changed. Why? Because of contemporary globalization and because of agribusiness. And it raises interesting questions when you can have food coming from anywhere in the world. If you have the money within 24 to 48 hours, what then is actually local? And perhaps to me, we are probably not interested in the country per se, or maybe we are, but instead I would suggest most delegates and where most of interest is coming from is interest in our country and interest in our local. And we want to sell our local country into our city. And it means, therefore, we must consider that relationship between the city and the country in the context of what I would describe as new rural relationalities. I'm not trying to sound like a sociologist, but that's what we have. We have new relations between the rural and the urban, but they're much more complex than what they used to be. Because now our rural around our cities are trying to compete with other rurals elsewhere. How does that occur? It occurs not just through promotion and intensification, it occurs other ways as well. It occurs in terms of the imposition of tariffs. In some cases, it occurs by thinking to reduce tariffs and actually open yourself up to markets. In some regions, there's agricultural subsidies to enable the rural to compete and not in others. We also see innovation. We also see place branding, and we also support for the deepening of local relations, which is very much where this conference comes from. But in saying that, I don't think we can isolate that deepening of local relations from those other strategies to try and reinforce our local wherever our local is. It means we are at a time where we have new geographies of local food. We have interest in conserving and promoting landscapes. We have interest and sense of place, but perhaps most significantly of all, we have this interest in new types of relationships. So we're seeing in some quarters, in some areas, but not everywhere, a relocalization of production. But at the same time, that is occurring when there's concern over food deserts, those poor neighborhoods in urban areas which have, fast food, liquor outlets, and very little access to fresh food. And it's not just an urban issue. There are rural areas which have neighborhoods and districts which are marked by subsistence wages. And they also have their own form of rural food desert. And that is also part of what we should be concerned about. The new geographies of local food, therefore, are concerned with sustainability, obviously, but they're also concerned in other ways, new ways of conceptualizing distance, the implications of food miles, of wine miles, particularly in a carbon-concerned age, and how we define local. Different parts of the world, even within regulation, define the local differently. And that we therefore have competing notions of scale, local versus regional, different issues of consumption, different ways of thinking about production as well. Diversification or not, what is the best way to compete? And what about the provision of infrastructure? Because that is also part of the issue of trying to promote the local. It may be fine promoting local production, but unless you have the infrastructure in place to get it to market and store and add value, what then is the value of it? One way of conceptualizing this, which has been around for about 100 years, is the notion of a food shed. In the same ways you can have a watershed, you can have a food shed. And a food shed is a way of representing land resources that supports food production for a region, community, or a city. It's your geographic origin of a food supply. And the size and shape is shaped by political factors, but also economic and transportation factors. And in many ways for food, it's the transport distance that is the most important, to be able to get that connectivity between country and city. And these concerns over food sheds are extremely important at the moment when we are concerned because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and other factors in terms of issues of food security. So therefore, the issue of food shed, I think, is at the heart of much of what this program is about. Also, what are the benefits we associate with local food systems? It's common to associate benefits such as reducing transport and energy needs, improved health because of freshness of food. It's also common to talk about enhancing local economies and also have more environmentally sensitive agricultural practices. Ideally, the focus on local food systems also encourage community interaction, protect local farms, and are overall more sustainable. But it's the ideal. As I will be arguing, it isn't necessarily the case, and we need to be careful, therefore, in how we consider the local. I'm not questioning the potential, it's there, but I think we should not be blind to other concerns we may have. So, for example, in terms of the very important of diversity and food diversity, which we keep losing, clearly the conservation of local family farms and small holdings appears to be the main way to conserve such diversity. So therefore, we can think of such strategy as seed saving, heritage initiatives, and also the adoption and use of traditional farming and fishing methods. Another way of responding to biodiversity and food diversity loss is to focus on artisanal production. And what in some areas, and there's been whole TV programs on this, local food heroes. They are undoubtedly important, but at the same time, in order to conserve food diversity, there needs to be regulation as well. How do you farm? How do you kill? How do you harvest? How do you store? How do you add value? All of that is part of the food supply chain, which affects what happens in production, how it gets to the city. Those things are also part, therefore, of how we need to be considering this relationship, this food relationship between the rural and the city. And clearly, and what I think many papers in the meeting are focusing on, is that importance of direct and intermediated markets. I know that direct marketing, direct to store, direct to market, as a way of trying to retain more value for producers, but also get it to the end consumer quicker. When we look at direct marketing, there's a number of ways in which the country comes to the city and the city comes to the country, because both can have the same effect. And in fact, they mutually reinforce each other ideally. So we have farm stalls, pick your own, the growth of farm stays, restaurants and food services, and very importantly, food retail. Most people buy their food at supermarkets in the cities. What therefore is the relationship between local food and the supermarket? Food and wine tourism is obviously a major focal point. And it is important, that direct-to-consumer dimension, but not everyone can succeed. There are a range of advantages in food and wine tourism. That consumer exposure to product, potential increase in sales margins, educational opportunities, market intelligence. But at the same time, for some producers, there are disadvantages. There's increased costs of management in terms of time. Capital is required. If you're a small farming business, what is the best use of capital? Where do I put it? Food tourism or wine tourism may not be it. You may be much better improving your own storage. You may be much better buying a new truck and getting it to market quicker. So please do not reify tourism as being the answer, because in some cases you have food businesses which go down that path and it's not appropriate for them, because there's opportunity costs. What is the best way of spending money in terms of what you want to achieve as a business? And increasingly we're realizing that, some food businesses and some wine businesses and other type of drink production, they're just in the wrong place. Tourism is not for them. Farm stalls and pick your own is an interesting way of connecting the city and the country. And in many parts of the world, and I'm thinking particularly in North America, highly successful. But there's different ways of approaching it. I think, to me, some of the most interesting innovation in this area is the growth of farm box orders direct from family farm, but also farms which offer plots of land for people in the city to come and grow things on. There are many different ways of trying to get this relationship. Direct sales is obviously a major focal point. How do we get direct from producer to restaurants? The importance of institutional catering, and again, the importance of government in terms of directing schools or other institutions to be purchasing locally, which happens in certain parts of the world. Arguably, those direct linkages provide for some of the best economic returns to the region because of attention of spend. Restaurants, and particularly white tablecloth restaurants, have obviously been a focal point here. And I think destination white tablecloth restaurants are important, but the food system and the restaurant system is much wider than that. Pizza bars, burger bars, they can all still buy local. And that may be just as important for the local economy, maybe sometimes even more important, because that's often in many parts of the world, even though they may have other foodways, that's often what they buy in the city, that universal kind of thing of what you buy. So we therefore need to think of how the food shed is organized, how dense it is, how interrelated it is, because the denser the food shed is in terms of interrelations, the more stable it potentially is and the more resilient it is. So therefore, in terms of inter-regional linkages, how do we encourage it? Because there's many benefits. Local products tend to produce less waste in restaurants and they add more value if they are promoted. Direct purchasing from the local is a way of stimulating the growth of new products and varieties, which is an interesting issue because in many parts of the world, the focus is on the heritage varieties. But in a time of climate change and environmental change, what then is the role for growing new varieties in responding to those new challenges we face. Clearly, there's a contribution to regional branding if people know about it. What it does highlight in terms of the focus on intra-regional linkages is the importance of local supply chains. How are they organized? I think one of the things I've learned over the years is that many people have a far too romantic notion of what farming is like, what food tourism is like, and what local supply chains look like. It is not romantic in the slightest in many ways. Most restaurants and most chefs do not go to the farmers market to go buy their food. That's not how they purchase. It means if you're going to be effective in trying to connect the city and the rural, you have to understand how the supply chain works. And that is why supermarkets and food retail is so important, and getting into the supermarkets is so important, because as I said earlier, that is where the majority of people in the cities buy their food from. That's not to say that farmers markets are not important. They are. They do help emphasize local. And in fact, some of the most interesting studies show how having a farmers market actually can complement supermarkets. They are not necessarily competing. They are often complementary. And it's a way of educating, because the genuine farmers markets offers the opportunity to meet growers and understand where their food comes from. It's experiential and it's positive for consumers. One interesting thing with farmers market is that in the US, food vouchers for the poorer people are actually given to go buy at farmers markets, which is a really interesting model of trying to encourage local purchase. And often farmers markets are a way of suppliers to develop their networks and advance their business, but they often are highly romanticized. What we are therefore trying to think about in these connections is, how do we encourage these network relations? How do we create these direct relations with consumers and direct sales and between businesses? How do we develop these new connectivities? Because from the research we've done here, for example, if we're using restaurants and chefs and farmers as an example, there are barriers and constraints. For most restaurants and chefs, because of time scarcity, their preferred way of purchasing local food is actually through the wholesale distributor, which means that we need to have wholesale distributors on board if we are going to make this connection between the country and the city work. It also means we have to be aware of issues of time, price, quality, customer services, logistics, delivery of products on time to the kitchen door. They are the key issues which we face. It's not the freshness, it's how do we get the produce there. And for producers, the same issues occur. They are often very keen to make those connections, but often they have to go through wholesalers because that makes it easier for restaurants to buy, and also in many cases for supermarkets to buy. How well, therefore, do we understand the food system? We have a clear series of motivations and enablers to try and do this. But how do we leverage it? Wholesalers need to be on board. I cannot emphasize this enough. Personal relations are also important. And farmers, if they're to be effective, have to pay attention to the market, not only in terms of the food that's wanted, but getting it there on time in the appropriate condition and with the right safety assurances. To conclude, though, we have to avoid the local trap. Not everything that is local is going to be sustainable. And I think that's a major issue. Yes, it can contribute to economic prosperity and stability, but just being local per se does not guarantee it. The local trap is the assumption that regionally based and small-scale agriculture is de facto more sustainable and socially just. It is not necessarily true. Sustainability, economic justice, social justice, particularly for smallholders, is part of a bigger issue of the food system and what constitutes justice. It isn't necessarily sustainable. On my farm here next door, I've got people using enormous amounts of pesticides. Their food is as local as mine. It's still local, but it's not sustainable? I would argue in the long term. And there's many different criteria you can have to assess sustainability. All the pictures you've had in my presentation are from my farm. The picture in front of you now is from this week when we had enormous amounts of rain and some of my fields were flooded. That's also the reality of farming. And it also means that we're bound in a larger system. We're dealing with environmental change. We're dealing with the wider food system. If we're actually serious about sustainability in the food system, it's not just thinking locally, it is also thinking globally, because the local responds to those global economic, environmental, and political changes. We are, in fact, have a whole series of different locals who learn from each other, but are also competing for each other. If we are looking at the sustainable development of food producing areas, I think, therefore, that food production is only part of a bigger issue of rural sustainability. In this part of the world, we have urban encroachment, as many farms, near city farms do. How do we respond to urban encroachment? How do we respond to climate change? How do we respond to the changing environment in which we face? All these are part of what we have to deal with, and all these are the things we have to respond to. But my final word is, if we're focusing on the local, yes, we may be doing it because we think we're more sustainable, but ultimately that depends on the global situation. And also we focus on the local to compete more effectively. And what worries me quite genuinely in saying that we compete more effectively is, does it just mean that by doing that, we are reinforcing the system, which has got the food system and social and economic systems in so much problem in the first place? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for this call to arms, almost for adopting a critical perspective on research. Thank you. It was very interesting. I would just add that please, who is watching us, please feel free to put questions through Zoom or at the YouTube section of comments. We will pick them up at the end and address the participants. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll go now to the presentation of Fusté-Forné. Francesc, correct me if I'm, is a professor and researcher at the Department of Business at University of Girona in Spain. He holds a PhD in tourism and a PhD in communication. His research is focused on food and rural marketing and tourism. Particularly, he has studied the connections between authenticity, food heritages and identities, landscapes and landscapers, regional development, rural activities, street food and tourist experiences. He also conducts applied research on the role of gastronomy in relation to mass media and as a driver of social changes. He has extensively published about these topics over the recent years, and thank you again for accepting our invitation. You may proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. First of all, I would like to thank also Elisabeth as chairwoman of the conference and the organizing committee for the invitation. And I am very pleased being here today, and also, of course, sharing this session with Michael and Elisabeth. It's a big pleasure for me, and also thank you to all the people attending this session. So my presentation is entitled Food in Place Marketing, Rural Identity in Urban Markets Through Cheese. And I will also take on some of the issues raised by Michael in the previous presentation through an example of a case study we've been conducting in some markets in Catalonia. So first of all, I would like to start with this slide, which also takes on this difficult challenge that both farmers and restaurants face, with the objective of making the menus which are sustainable from the perspective of where products come and from the perspective of who is behind the products we eat. And I like to start with this slide because these are the Roca brothers. And I know that, well, Roca Brothers own a restaurant, a high-end restaurant in Girona, which has been awarded 3 Michelin stars and also awarded a couple of times as the best restaurant in the world. And I know that as a high-end restaurant, this is a bit out of these rural and urban connections. I will explain later, but I like to highlight these chefs and the restaurant because they really take care of the local provenance of the products. They know firsthand the producers, the growers, the fishermen, and they create a menu which is aware of the local environment, which is aware of the local products, which is aware of the local people behind these local products. And while this is an expensive experience, when this type of restaurants and this type of chefs, which are well, mediatized, they are celebrity chefs, which are also ambassadors of the territory. So it's not only the gastronomic experience, which of course is limited to a specific profile of customers, but they are also ambassadors thanks to this media exposure. They also promote the territory where they are, and they also promote the products they use and the farmers, the growers that are behind these products. So that's the reason. No, I would like to start with this slide and acknowledging while it's difficult not to keep this strong connection with the local farmers and the local growers because of the challenges also explained by Michael in the previous presentation. Of course, we can find examples where even with these high-end experiences, they try not to make strong connections between the territory, the products, and the final menus they are delivering. So when we build these connections between rural and urban through food tourism, first of all, we think about the local authenticity. So how we can protect and promote the authenticity of the products. And here there are two big factors, no? The natural and cultural factors. On one side, the cultural factors, which refer to so the knowledge behind the processes of production, distribution, the process of, in the case of cheese, of making cheese. And this is the knowledge that is communicated from generation to generation. And it's part of this cultural values that are also attached to the products and the dishes we make. And also, when we talk about authenticity, we talk about the environmental factors, the nature itself, not the landscape where the food comes. It can be like the land, the sea, and in the case of cheese, this is also clearly connected. No, the cheese is made from the milk obtained from the animals, grazing and feeding in the landscape. So the connection between the features of the landscape, no, and the climate, the soil conditions are transferred to the final product through the milk, and which is this environmental value, and also through the way the farmers milk and make cheese, which is referred to this cultural heritage not transmitted to the final product. And here, when we talk about authenticity, of course, we talk about the place where the food comes from, but also the moment when the food grows or when the food is harvested, because it's not the same what the animals eat in summer than in winter. Then the milk does not taste the same in summer than in winter, so the final cheese also tastes different in summer than in winter. And this is also observed with products that we fish or other products, like clearly reflect this the moment when a food should be eaten, not to keep this authenticity. Is the case of mushrooms. Of course, thanks to the global processes, we can eat mushrooms all over the year. But in the case of Catalan mountains, for example, so we can pick mushrooms between late summer and mid-autumn. So this is the right moment, no, when the mushrooms keep this authenticity, because it's not only where the mushrooms are picked or harvested, but also when. And this the seasonal component is clear, but sometimes we forget that the time, no, when a product is grown or is harvested is also crucial to keep this authenticity. Then we have the regional development as part of this food tourism development and management. And then here also there is the challenge, no, from the farmers and growers perspective, because we've been talking with lots of people working in the primary sector, and they always report similar concern. So we as workers or as visitors, we have schedules. I mean, we have like Easter breaks or Christmas breaks or summer holidays, but nature doesn't, and that means that they are primarily working with nature. They should go with the hares. They milk every day and they make cheese, let's say, every 2 days. They don't have fixed schedules, and this is a challenge when they want, if they want to get involved with tourism. And both tourism stakeholders and visitors, we need to understand that, no, we are not dealing with structured tours, and we cannot just go there and expect that they are ready to make us a visit to the farm, because and this is difficult sometimes to get this the farmers, or to get the primary sector stakeholders involved with tourism. So when we talk, or when we think about regional development in terms of food tourism experiences, we need to deeply consider the concerns of these farmers, these growers, and how they want, if they want, and what we can expect, not as a result of dealing with these natural cycles, which are different than the let's say human cycles, no. And finally, the third big issue in the food tourism development is the tourist experience itself. So, and here we could go back to the definitions by Hall himself, and or definitions by Long, where with the food tourist experience we aim not to discover a place through food, and we can do that by visiting a restaurant, attending a fair, a festival, a market, or visiting a farm gate and the landscapes where the animals are grazing, or where the apples or kiwis are growing. So the tourist experience, or the food tourist experience, encapsulates all these type of experiences, which allow us not to discover a place through its taste, not through its food, its dishes, and the people behind these products. So if specifically we focus on food tourism niches, I've been working with cheese tourism and analyzing different manifestations of cheese-based tourism experiences in different places. We defined it some years ago, the different dimensions of cheese-based tourism, which I will not focus now, but I will deep into the markets, specifically urban markets, for this presentation, and explain some of the results we found as a result of our field work in markets. So the study idea where the results come from is this region, which is Costa Daurada, which is in the southeastern coast of Catalonia, northeastern Spain. And we did a field work in these three cities, Reus, Cambrils, and Salou, where we visited the three municipal markets in each of these cities, and compiled a couple of years ago. We compiled around 1,000 food products available in the markets in order to analyze, first of all, so the type of products, the type of food landscape that the market promotes, and second, the origin of these products. So if they are promoting a local, regional, national, or international type of food. So the venue, the food place we analyze is the urban market, the urban municipal market, and we understand, drawing also on previous literature, urban markets as spaces for food tourism attraction, and also spaces that allow visitors to explore the local sense of place through the food that the place offers. But we question, or we ask, what is the type of food place that markets promote, and specifically we aim to answer this question. Are market spaces of authenticity, sociocultural diversity, and multicultural communication in the context of rural urban food tourism? And as a result of the analysis of these 1,000 products, the first picture we have is what the type of products we found. So there are 43% of the products are fruits and vegetables, then 32% meat and animal products, one quarter of the sample fish, and 2% nuts. And we added nuts as a separate category because Reus and the area of Costa Daurada is an important producer of local nuts. Even we have a specific type of nuts which is acknowledged as a designation of origin, which, well, as a quality level, it offers also an extra or an added value when we commercialize this type of local products. And that's the reason why we added nuts as an independent category, which is only, of course, a small proportion within the whole market picture, and it reflects only 2%. Then we analyzed the origin of all these products, and we found here a balance between, if we take together local and regional, and then national and international, we have more or less half of products from local regional origin and half of products from national international origin. And we observe here the most relevant presence of local and national, with 32% and 36%, and a lower percentage of international products with only 11.8%. But how this origin is distributed among different types of different categories of products. So if we focus, for example, on well, we can focus on fish in terms of products, no? And with fish, we observe this relevant role of the local origin, because Costa Daurada, as I said, is a coastal destination in the southeastern side of Catalonia, and Cambrils is a very important maritime harbor in the whole Catalonia, and that's one of the reasons of this local origin of fish. However, we also have these regional and national origins of cheese, because as you may know, in Canterbury Sea, for example, and even some parts of the south of Spain are also important in terms of these fishing industries. And also, as Michael said, in a few hours we can have fish from southern Spain or even other regions in Europe delivered to a local farm, a local municipal market. No, but however, fish keeps this local origin. Then, if we focus on meat and animal products, where we can find also cheese, we have also a relevant presence of local, but here the most important origin is national origin. No? And here we observe that there is a big significance of the products with protected designations of origin and also geographically protected indications. So all the products with quality labels, which also include cheese, are popular, no, in terms of this market landscape. And that's the reason also with Iberian ham is another product which is typical in the markets all over the country, and also with the quality labels, acknowledging the origin and the processes of production. And that's why now we have this national presence in terms of meat and animal products. Then we have fruits and vegetables, where again local and national are the most important provenances. And here the explanation is obvious, or well, as a result of the field work, now we found this result. Local fruits and vegetables are seasonal products, and the national fruits and vegetables are usually non-seasonal products that come from the big agricultural fields in the south of Spain, Andalusia, Extremadura, Murcia, and they keep sourcing all these non-seasonal fruits and vegetables to the different regions in Spain. But that said, in the area of Costa Daurada and also in other parts of Catalonia, like Lleida and Girona itself, we have also like a large agricultural production, which mostly sources seasonal products. And finally, well, in terms of international, this higher relevance of international of fruits and vegetable is mostly refers to tropical fruits, coming from mainly Central and Latin America. Also, in the case of kiwis, from New Zealand and other countries in Southeast Asia in terms of other tropical fruits. But this is the most relevant category as international origin, the fruits and vegetable. But that's why it's tropical fruits. So if we take a deeper look on cheeses, in the case of meat and animal origin products, we have observed that here the role of local cheeses in the municipal markets is lower, and this especially includes fresh cheeses. In Catalonia, as in other parts of the world, there are examples of fresh cheeses, like for example, Recuit, which is traditionally in the area of Empordà, and these fresh cheeses comes on a daily basis to the markets, and they cannot take a big road not to be delivered, and that's the reason why these artisanal Catalan cheeses are the most popular in terms of local based products. And then we have, as here in the picture, the sellers both in the markets and other gourmet shops also make their own combinations. In this example, they got a fresh cheese from a local producer, and they then make a specific gorgonzola with other ingredients, and the final product is this Italian flavored cheese made with local fresh cheese. Then, in case of this national origin, as I previously said, we have the significance of the protected of the quality labels. And in case of Catalonia, we only have one cheese with the quality label, which is Urgelia, cheese which is made in the Pyrenees. And then, in the case of Spain, we have popular cheeses like Idiazabal or Manchego, Zamorano, and other cheeses which are not only popular internationally. I mean, they are not only exported, but they are also quite popular in the local people tables, and the quality label provides this awareness, this extra value in relation to the landscape where cheese come from, and also where what are the processes that are acknowledged through the quality label. Because the quality label is not only a way of acknowledging the territory, but also the ways we milk or the ways we make cheese. And finally, we have the international cheeses. So in terms of percentages, and I am finishing the presentation, in terms of percentages in the cheese product, with the cheese product itself, we have around 20% of the cheese is local, around 35-40% is national, and the remaining 40-45% is international. And here with the international examples, we also find a big weight in relation to cheeses from the big cheese countries like Switzerland or Italy or France. There are also a lot of examples from the Netherlands and even from Denmark or England. But we have observed that Switzerland and France are the countries where most of these international cheeses come from. This can be also because of the proximity of these countries to Catalonia and Spain, but also this is perceived by the customers as a top cheese. As this example in the picture is a tête de moine cheese, and the vendors explained to us that this is not only a way of consuming cheese. This is like a ceremony, as experience of cheese, the way we cut the slides and we present these slides in the form of flowers. So this is not only the cheese at the table, no, but also the experience we can create with this cheese table, and how this helps well, to create this socialization, these forms of communication of the specific way we not only produce cheese but also consume cheese, which also happens with other examples. So as a conclusion of this connection, so we are aware that these rural-urban connections create tension. We have well, this globalization we are currently facing. Let's say, of course, brings cheeses from everywhere in a short amount of time. So of course we can have the fresh cheese from the grower next to our door, but we can have also cheeses from any country in the world. And this creates challenges in terms of what are the types of sense of place we promote through the same place. So the market is the place where we can gather both this local cheese, but we can also gather this tête de moine or this Switzerland cheese. And this of course creates these spaces of multicultural communication, which are also due to the configuration of the local people. I mean, local people sell it in Catalonia or in any other place in the world, come from a huge variety of countries, and this also challenges the type of offer we should have, because we need to satisfy a variety of customer palates, and this also makes us not to have larger and larger offers of products, which are also observed in the case of cheese. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much again to the organizers and my co-presenters, and thank you all people attending. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Francesc. I think it is a really interesting presentation and makes us think like Costa Dourada may be an example of other frontier zones. Like it can be like a proof of concept of how local can be. But we'll discuss this afterwards. Thank you so much for your presentation. We'll go now to the presentation of Elisabeth Kastenholz. She's an associate professor at the Department of Economics, Management and Industrial Engineering at University of Aveiro, Portugal, where she teaches tourism and marketing related subjects, integrating the university's research unit, COP, and serving as a coordinator of the International PhD program in marketing and strategy. With an academic background of studies in tourism management and planning, consumer behavior and marketing, her main research interests lie in the field of tourist behavior and destination marketing, more specifically in sustainability yielding destination marketing, accessible tourism, the tourist experience, and rural tourism, food and wine, cultural and nature-based tourism, and tourism-enhanced rural development. She currently coordinates the national funded Project Wine. And please, I'll pass the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. I first would like to thank also Elisabeth Figueiredo for inviting me for this very interesting conference. I would like to say hello also to Michael and Francesc, and thank you very much for very interesting presentations that I can link to now with mine. And good morning, everybody who is now watching us. Can you see my screen? Yes? Okay, so I have the pleasure to be here today and talk about some of the results of our Twine project and to discuss the potential of wine tourism in Portugal, particularly in the central region of Portugal. My focus here will be more on the tourism experience and the role of wine and other local products in this experience, and particularly wine as an ancient culture, landscape shaping product has received increasing interest from not only the markets, but also wine producers and communities, because it is very much linked to potential multiplier effects, and it's very much also enhancing local culture, traditions, identities. Wine tourism has been conceptualized as a special interest rural tourism indeed, and it is much associated to hedonic consumption, being considered a very sensory appealing and shared type of experience, very much also linked to terroir, to the place, to the region where it is being developed, and which is very frequently referred to as unique, with a unique geography, geography, culture, and in a particularly socially, historically embedded reality. And this is part of its appeal, the local in the midst of the tension between the local and the global that you have also referred to before, Francesc and Michael. It's a quest to get away from the urban, from the standardized, from the massified, and to get immersed in a new kind of a reality that is frequently also idealized, romanticized, and not in reality existing as some people seek it. But it's the quest of the rural, of the personalized, of local culture, of authenticity. So there are many facets of this kind of experience that make it unique, standing out, and being increasingly sought by new tourism markets. So it is, apart from hedonic, meaningful, it's social, it's related to local culture and nature. And here we find a kind of new opportunities also for local agents. And also local producers have increasingly understood this potential to increase, for example, their more profitable cellar wine selling, to promote also their wine brands and the territory brands through the boot development. But in reality, it's more than just the winery experience that people are looking for, especially if we look at the diversity of people that go to these regions. It surpasses the wine cellar and winery context. People like to explore the entire region, its landscape, history, and culture. They like to engage with the places and with their people. So sometimes we talk about terroir tourism instead of only wine or winery tourism, and multiple demands actually can stimulate the local economy and the local communities and societies. They can strengthen also local culture and regional development. So this is the issue here, and this is also a big concern in Portugal, where some of the rural territories are really in need to find alternatives. Portugal is a country that is rich in wine traditions with a century-old wine producing history. It is ranking actually third worldwide in variety of wine grapes, and in times of loss of biodiversity, I think this is a quite interesting fact. More than 250 types of wine grapes we can find. And despite its small size, it is one of the world's most important exporters of bottled wines. It's number 8. And it's also increasingly recognized for its wine qualities, receiving a lot of awards, and it's well known amongst wine lovers. But however, it's still not much known as a wine tourism destination, perhaps except for the Oporto area with port wines and the port cellars and the Douro Valley. And this is, of course, also related to not so much developed wine tourism supply. And in this context, the Portuguese government has defined an ambition to make Portugal a must-see and sustainable wine tourism destination worldwide. However, this is not so easy to succeed in and to make it so successful and truly sustainable. And it requires knowledge and understanding of the visitor markets, their profiles, their diversity, but also of the wine regions at stake, the central players, their resources, the attractions that exist in the regions, and the dynamics between the different players. And it is necessary to well understand the essence of the wine tourism experience, its co-creation between the different players, and based also on the local and regional resources, and the conditioning factors that define the possible outcomes. And in this context, we have been working on this project in the last 4 years. Actually, yesterday was the official final date of the project, but we're still working on integrating many of the results that are still being dealt with. So it's a project about co-creation in tourism and wine experiences in rural areas. And based on our understanding that actually it's the tourist experience that is making people move to these places, people seek, in fact, and above all, appealing, unique, memorable experiences that arouse their senses, that touch their hearts, that engage them personally, that stimulate their minds. However, it's not only about the tourists, of course. All this is co-created. It's co-created between visitors, between local residents and suppliers of tourism in the particular areas at stake. And we are talking about tourist experiences that are very much based on local resources and local resources, culture, products, geography, places, you name it. And it's very much the capacity to make this all work together, to articulate it, and to have this co-creation actually functioning in a positive way that may boost eventually sustainable rural development. We did our research in 3 regions that are associated to wine routes, and you can see it here on the map. Bairrada is actually the region where we are responsible for in University of Aveiro. We had the collaboration of the Polytechnic Institute of Viseu that was collecting the data in the Down region, that is more in the interior, and in the very much interior, very near to the Spanish border, we have Beira Interior with the colleagues from University of Beira Interior participating in this. It was very much a research in which we did a lot of field work. So during these last 3 years, we went a lot to these regions, and we did a lot of interviewing, surveys, and observing the realities that are quite distinct between these 3 regions, although it is not such a big distance. It's a small country. However, there are big differences between the coastal areas that are more developed and more populated, and the interior, which it has really more problems regarding depopulation, aging population, and marginality and lack of economic opportunities. So we were quite a big team here. Is only part of it visible that we met in the kickoff meeting in July 2018. Bernard Lane, you might know, he was the consultant of this project, and we had a team that it was multidisciplinary from the fields of economy, sociology, marketing, tourism studies, planning, geography, anthropology. So we had many different knowledge, and it was a really shared project in which we also used different types of approaches, more qualitative, more quantitative approaches, and we did also some innovative research looking at laboratory experiences like eye tracking and even EEG, and I will just present very briefly part of our results. So we did a lot of interviewing, surveying, and of course, we had some problems during the COVID times. It was not so easy to collect all this data, and that is why we actually had to prolong it, and we still collected visitor data in the regions where it was more difficult to obtain our results until very recently. But still, I think we got some interesting results. The surveying, we did it mostly on site in different places where we typically were able to meet the tourists, and here we find some of these places are nearly empty. It was very much conditioned by COVID, as you understand. Also in the winery context and close to the attraction sites we did it, and sometimes also in events that were related to wine tourism. We also did a GPS tracking analysis in which we had tourists participate with watches that collected the data on the movements they made inside the wine route. And it was interesting to obtain results that showed us where people moved more. And actually these movements were not always related to the routes that the wine route would suggest, and not always so much focused on the wine tourism attractions, but rather on other attractions of cultural, historical, or natural relevance. However, it's very important to understand these kind of movements to eventually be able to improve our orientation and eventually signposting or indications that we would suggest on our website. So we had some of these analysis undertaken that might be useful for the wine route developers. I would like to still mention this quite different type of analysis in which we used psychophysiological indicators such as peripheral nervous system measurements to collect the data in the laboratory, in which people were confronted on the computer with photos and with videos and with websites to understand in how far they reacted differently to these kind of photos and videos, and ask them in the end also to participate in a survey to connect these kind of neurophysiological data with the content that people attributed to the visualization of this kind of materials. And it helped us to understand how people, for example, reacted distinctly to the indoors and towards the outdoors, and where actually they were more attracted to which kind of stimuli they were more attracted to. And this helped us understand which kind of stimuli are more impactful, and actually also understand diversity amongst potential visitors, because not everybody is attracted to the same thing. We also used this kind of devices on site in the field and in the winery, accompanying the visitors and trying to find out actually also how they reacted differently in the two different types of contexts, and also understanding what kind of stimuli and what kind of natural context would make them react distinctly. And we got some interesting results from this. However, bioplugs is very difficult to use in this context, because there is a lot of noise, and it was quite difficult to really understand how everything is related, because we need to take into account all this noise, and probably there is still a lot of things that need to be done to make this technique function well on site. We had some psychologists on our team, and they actually were not so happy with the results. However, I now share some of the results that we are more confident about. Sorry. The experience that were reported in the interviews, but also in social media analysis and also in our surveys, showed that most of the visitors of these regions, they were not only winery centered, although they actually valued a lot the wines, but wine must be understood as just a part of the experience for most of the travelers. So they are much more oriented towards the entire terroir experience, to landscape, culture, all kind of other experiences that are included here. They are very much involved with the aesthetic and with the sensory experience context also. It's not only about visual issues, it's also about tasting of food and wine, it's about all kind of senses, and it's very much also an educational learning experience in which people are very curious and want to get to know about the places that they visit and about the people, about tangible and intangible culture that is specific to each region. The laboratory experience showed us also the role of the outdoors versus the indoors, and probably this is an important issue for the wineries. They probably should be more emphasizing, investing in experiences also in the outdoors environment, not only in the indoors. And this seems to be not only relatable to COVID. Of course, COVID had an impact here. However, also the social media analysis we undertook was broad. It incorporated data from the past 15 years, so we can be very sure about the importance of the outdoors as well in a general context. Another important finding was the importance of social interaction, which is very much valued and very impactful. And both the interaction with staff, with the guide, and with the wine producer is very much valued, cherished, and remembered and shared with others online, for example. And we also found, however, there are differences between different types of people. There are those that are more wine involved, others that are less wine involved. There are family markets with kids that are not very much catered for, but they do exist and they should probably be catered to as well. There are distinct motivations. However, what we could find through our quantitative data, that there is a potential to increase loyalty to the region and its products, not only wine, but other products, through interaction with the staff, but also interaction with other visitors and with the local community. So interaction, again, was something very important, and that should be stimulated by, for example, wine route developers. And the intention to continue to purchase local wine and other local products was found to be stronger amongst the wine involved. Interestingly, also amongst men, amongst those living in aesthetically more appealing experience, and amongst those interacting more with staff. Again, interaction with the staff is very important, so we should empower our staff, explain them how to interact with our visitors, to make them actually be ambassadors of our local products and make them also loyal wine and local product consumers in the future. There seems to be a lot of potential for this kind of co-creation, and sustainability also was found to be an important issue for producers and clients alike. Local residents are not yet, however, so much involved in this kind of experiences. They seem to be favorable about tourism. They are very proud of their local products and local wines. However, they are not yet as much involved as they might be. Agents of supply, not all understand the role and impact and potential of terroir tourism. However, it depends. There are differences between these local agents. They sometimes do not understand the role of collaboration and networks. However, some are quite interested in this and are actually available to collaborate and innovate. There is a need to improve route orientation, to be also differentiating better different publics, and to involve also more outdoors experiences. There are regional differences, of course, that should be understood. And interestingly, we found that through COVID, people became more aware of their need to be resilient, to adapt, to collaborate. And this may be also a lesson for the future, because we are living continuous difficult times, as also Michael referred to, particularly climate change. And we are living complicated times in Portugal now, also in other parts of Europe, forest fires, drought. These are really difficult times for agriculture, for wine production, and also for tourism. Nobody wants to go to these places where we are at risk of forest fires, and the wine producers are very much aware of the risk of droughts and water supply shortage, but also other risks related to climate change. So there seems to be potential in making rural wine tourism an important contributor to sustainable regional development. However, there are many issues to be considered that are related to markets, but also to the capacity of local agents, to the involvement of local communities, and also to context. And this context is local, it's regional, but it's also global. And we must be aware of the challenges that we are facing now, not only locally, but globally, to be really able to go forward in a sustainable way. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'm available for the further debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. It's a wonderful project. Thank you. So we are now starting the debate. I just need to collect some questions. Please feel free to put. Okay, we didn't have any questions on YouTube, so maybe I have two questions now, one for Francesc and another one for Michael. Maybe I can start and then we. So in strings, we analyzed an extensive collection of promotional materials from the urban specialty source, and found that they emphasize several dimensions, but there are clearly two major ones. So one combining health, environment, and sustainability, and the other one, authenticity, tradition, and typicality. And these two often they don't overlap. So the first one refers to vegetables and derivatives and more organic productions, and the second one to PDO and more cheese or meat and derivatives. So my question for Francesc is if the research that you do with Costa Dourada reflects the same or different factors, also for cheese. And my question for Michael is if you think there is an emerging or consolidated social representation of local as being sustainable, and considering that this is not always the case, how can retailers and producers communicate trustworthiness about locality so they can differentiate themselves from agri-industrial productions? So,
shall I go first? I think for me, just being local, obviously it's important for branding purposes, but if you're going to be sustainable, you also need to be giving information about your ecological credibility, about your emissions. So I therefore think that certain certifications will probably become more important. My one hesitation in saying that is that often there is consumer confusion over certification, but that is where national and EU law becomes extremely important in terms of protections available to consumers from the claims that are made. And you know, if I was lobbying for the local, I think that the consumer protection laws, in fact, are absolutely critical in a regulatory fashion to be able to ensure that the consumer has guarantees over what they receive in terms of its localness and its sustainability.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. In relation to the cheese well, communication, let's say, I think that here also the certifications, in this case, the protected destination of origin or geographical protected indication play the major role in communicating about this quality of origin and the objective of creating awareness among customers. I mean, both in national and international cheeses, I would say 95% of the cheeses sold in the markets are cheeses with these quality labels. And this is a bit different with local and regional cheeses because the supply chain is shorter and cheeses are faster moving from farm to markets. But in terms of how they are placed within the offer, the quality labels are the elements that add the value to the product and offer the customers this confidence, this trust in relation to the origin and the making processes.
But connecting both, if there is some consumers confusion, and there are many studies showing that they don't recognize the labels, or they are not, or there are too many labels for one product, or how can we counteract, how can we improve communication about national and EU labels? Maybe I'll put also the question to Elisabeth about wine, because wine is, do you think that certification in wine for consumers is important? Or it's more about the terroir and...
Well, I think the wines that are already these, the regions that are already certified. And I think this is already a guarantee that they come from these territories, from these terroirs. It's definitely important for the wine consumers, and it's important for the wine territories to make their terroirs more well known, and tourism can help in this respect. But I think also as far as, for example, sustainability is concerned, there are some attempts from wineries to make their wines more biological, and to decrease the carbon footprint. And some of those winery agents, they told us, yes, they are concerned about this being understood by the client. So probably it's important to have these certifications that are understood by all customers, and perhaps the EU politics should help to create these kind of labels that are recognizable by all, so that those that are really investing in more sustainable products and wines would be actually recognizable and have an advantage also economically, probably.
Yes.
I think one of the other interesting things in this for me is that I think it depends where you are in the world. In lots of areas in the world, there's lots of people who actually are not that concerned with terroir. They're actually concerned with the cost of the food, and they are actually concerned with some more generic attributes. And so I don't disagree with what's been said, but I think there are some markets are more interested in some of these aspects than others in terms of what is provided. And I think that is one of the challenges that we face. But I think it also requires us to be thinking more widely about what the local means to people. And it's why I often make the point that for many people, they actually don't care too much about the local, unless it's sold to them, if you like. They're not worried about the local cheese necessarily. They are worried about what they get in the burger or what they get in the takeaway. And that's where I think some of the other connectivities need to be. But it's not an either or situation. There are different markets want different things from the local. And I think we just have to be working with that a little bit more.
Yes, and I was thinking about the markets, because there are different markets. You were talking about around the world, like New Zealand is a completely different market from Portugal, for instance, but there are also different markets within the country, right?
Yeah.
So,
well,
sorry, Elisabeth
sorry.
and Alexandre. I will start with Elisabeth. I don't know which one came first.
I think Alexandre raised the hand first.
So can go Alexandre first,
if you want.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, really interesting presentations. Thank you very much for your very interesting subjects. What I would like to ask, well, starting from this idea of multiple markets, of course, there are different niches and people with different interests that focus on different aspects of products. One thing that it's not very, it's quite minoritarian in our interviews in the context of the Strings project, but I think it's quite interesting. It's this sort of counterintuitive idea that for some people, the ability to know what products are of good quality, irrespective of being certified or not, is a certain kind of mark of expertise. So they're kind of proud of knowing, I know this cheese is great and it's not even PDO, you know. So I was wondering what thoughts you have about that, and if this is a sort of contradiction in the system itself, or is just part of the fact that there is a different market segmentation, different niches, different people, different demands. The question is for all of you.
Well, thanks for the question. And yeah, I think that, well, it's also a matter in terms of vendors. I mean, for vendors to sell cheese with a quality label could be easier, to sell than other type of products without the quality label. But also, of course, here there are different issues. If we analyze markets, it's different than if we analyze supermarkets, and it's different if we analyze like local chain supermarkets or big chain supermarkets. And here there is also this economic role of the suppliers and how they are placed within these commercialization processes. And added to this, also there is this market segmentation and the types of customers. And for example, in our interviews, they also mentioned like during the Christmas period, they sell more cheeses than ever and more different types of cheeses than ever, because people like just to prepare different amazing things with taking maybe cheeses, innovative cheeses from different countries. And well, it's different if you are preparing a meal with your partner, or if you are having a big meal with the family, if you have children or not. All different cultural, social aspects and economic, of course, as Michael said earlier, a situation makes a difference in the type of cheese, the cheese or whatever the product you gather, and that also makes you to take a decision on what are the attributes you value the most. And the origin can be one, the label can be other, or depending on the moment, neither the origin nor the label.
Yeah, can I say something about our wine experiences? I think your topic is very important, that there are people referring to the facts, well, that the job or whatever is not that important, but they are proud of knowing particularly produced product, probably personally. And here comes our personal experiences in. And we had this, for example, in Barada, some of our tourists, they did not have Barada as their top rated wines, but after being in a certain winery, talking to a particular producer or to an enologue who explained all the details, and they had a really nice connection and a wonderful emotional experience, they would buy that wine and they would continue buying this wine. So it's very much the tourism experience, the personal experience that people have with the producers on the particular site makes such a difference, because then people think of the context, they think of the memorable experiences, they will continue purchasing this wine and think that they actually support these local producers. So I think this makes a difference. The experience, the visit makes a difference. That's why I think that this kind of tourism experiences for wine and for other local products can be very important for creating loyalty towards these brands, independently of being a very well-known or not so well-known and being certified or not.
I just completely agree with Elisabeth there. I think it's partly that relationship, but as part of that relationship and experience, you have people building up their food expertise. They are learning as they go along because of that relationship. And I think that really is the way, not only to loyalty to that individual, but often to other producers in the region as well. So I think that's where the experience becomes extremely important. And I think, to me, that is, if I'm looking at the best way of trying to bring the local to the city, that's the way to do it. Any way you can do it by personal experience is always the most powerful way of marketing. and of learning.
Elisabeth?
Yes, so also a bit or completely connected to this. Michael, you said that sometimes tourism is not the answer for local producers, and I was here wondering why. Can you give some examples of cases in which tourism was not the answer, was not successful? And also this, sorry. This is connected with what the presentation of Elisabeth. I'm also wondering if you, Elisabeth, find any wine producers with this same feeling that tourism is not the answer, or some producers that regret to have enrolled in these wine tourism activities. And also for Elisabeth, the fact that you said that the local residents are not so much involved yet in these wine experiences and wine tourism experiences. And I would like to hear you a bit more about this. Whose fault is this? From the local residents, from the local communities, from the producers, from whom, if we can say it? And for Francesc, you said that 20% of the cheeses were local, then up to 40% national and 45% international. And what the producers of cheese, the Costa Daurada producers of cheese, think about this greater presence of international and even national, but mainly international cheeses in the markets. And that's it. Thank you. I don't know who wants to.
We will. Yeah. Okay. Perhaps several questions regarding those that are regretting. I don't recall anybody really regretting those of the winery suppliers to have invested. However, we were working in a difficult period, in the COVID period, and some actually found it difficult to continue their normal tourism business, and they had to stop, for example, the guided tours, but they still maintained often the shops during some period and with some restrictions. Most of them did not really regret, but they were waiting for more, especially those that have invested recently. Perhaps they had some higher hopes and higher expectations than what actually they found in the end, because we are talking about different routes with different types of development. And in Bayrada, for example, which we looked at more in depth, we have already some experience, and people, they knew to adapt to this market, and they actually found it quite valuable, mostly, yeah. Some of them did not know how to act in COVID times, and that was an issue, but and many were actually aware of the potential of better collaboration in the route. So they thought this would be a possibility to increase the outcome, the result from their investment, but they actually understood that they, through wine tourism, had increased sales, not only on the cellar door, but also they had increases. So most of them were quite happy with it. But it depends, of course, always also on the type of investment. And some of them, they told us they did not have the money to invest really professionally. So they did the very limited thing, just the tasting in the wine shop. and others were quite reluctant to invest more. For example, I have this PhD student who looks at the family market with kids, and they were reluctant to invest also in accessible tourism because they thought this would be too high of an investment and it would not pay off. However, we have some studies, benchmarking studies, that show us that there would be a potential, however, perhaps not for all of them. So probably it's a question of who can afford to invest and how much, because as Michael said, it's always a question of allocating scarce resources. And if you have other things to do in the first place, probably you don't think of tourism in the first place. Regarding community, of course, community is involved, particularly in the wineries where they are working in the winery. And so there is an impact, but oftentimes it's more indirect. I referred to the relatively little involvement because I compare this project with our village project, and in the villages, the tourism is functioning in a very different way because people are more in direct contact with the villagers when they visit the places, whereas in Bairrada, for example, people come with buses, they get to the winery. It's a question of organization, yeah. And they get to the winery, they go from place A to place B, and they do not really stay for longer times. So that is why the community frequently does not feel very much involved with tourism. If it's a different kind of tourism with more independent travelers going around, it might function in a different way. However, especially in the Bairrada region, it's a kind of excursionist type of tourism that people do not stay a longer time. And this is an issue that probably the region and the route might think of how to make people stay longer, how to make them stay in interesting places and show them also different parts of the region to make them stay longer. And if they stay longer, they will inevitably get more in contact also with the local population.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We're already on schedule, but maybe we can have a few more minutes. So, Elisabeth?
I don't know if Francesc or Michael want to answer.
We also had a question from Monica Druniger. I'm not sure if we can extend more 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think Michael didn't have the opportunity because I think I interrupted him. Sorry for it. And also Francesc.
I was just going to say that yes, there are places which either don't do wine tourism or food tourism because it's partly because of the issue of capital, but it also depends how many competitors you are. I mean, there's a bit of a reality is that if you have an area with say 30, 40 wineries, how many wineries can someone go round to in one day? And okay, you have several days, but eventually you have people, you know, they go to the wineries and at the end of the day, all they really want is a beer, actually. You know, so you have that. But it's also, you can be, in terms of wine routes and wine connectivity, you can just be located in the wrong place. You can be on the periphery of the wine region, so you don't get that many people. Now, in some cases, you can make that an advantage and make it a more special experience, but it can be difficult to do. So there are places which just by their position don't do very well. And it's like, you know, for years and years and years, I've been in teaching tourism and researching for too long. You go places and they say, we have, 100,000 cars, however many cars pass through every day. And you say, you're absolutely right, but they don't stop, do they? And so it's about getting people to stop. But if you stop at one location, you don't then stop at another in a particular time period. So there are therefore some locations which are, all they can ever be is toilet stops, which is fine. You have a toilet stop, you can have a meal, and you can make a living from that. But there are other places which by their nature are destinations. So it's also understanding how you are positioned in transport networks, in tourism flows, and what do you actually have to encourage people to stay the night. And I think that's why some places you know, some places are realistic and make it work really, really well because they know that they are a food and a toilet stop, but that's all they can really be. But that is good because you can still make money from that if you know what you have to do. But there are others who try and be something which they're not, and they get disappointed. But so I think it's a case of thinking of what are your products, where are you positioned, and match them with the market, and just be realistic.
So I'll be fast with my answer. In terms of these local cheese makers, there are two problems. One is that they mostly produce fresh cheese, which needs to be sold shortly after the cheese is made. And the second problem is that they distribute the cheese themselves. So they take the van and they go to the restaurant or go to the agri-food shop, and they do this distribution is a challenge because they have not like a distribution chain. They take the cheese themselves, and sometimes or some market vendors do not want to take the risk to have the cheese, because if it's not sold in the same day when they buy from the makers, then they lose economically, no? And this is difficult from this local perspective, because most of these local cheese makers are individual entrepreneurs with smaller structures, and this is difficult to participate in this, let's say, competitive markets of products.
Maybe there's no sound. Maybe, okay, it's 5 minutes past our time. Maybe we can end the session now.
You said you had a question.
There's another question. Do you have time?
Yeah,
okay. So
I think yes.
It's for Elisabeth. Okay, it's for Elisabeth. It's about what do you think through Entwine did you learn about the innovative techniques of data collection with BioPlus, and what would you do different? So
I'm not sure if I would use it. It was really difficult. For me, it was a totally innovative thing. And I invited a psychologist who is specialized in doing her laboratory work. And she was very much in doubt of it. And we tried it. And they told me it's so much noise. It's really hard to get some results from this. So probably BioPlus is not yet in the stage of being used. Well, I would not really recommend it. Sorry. We will still try to filter out something and get out some results, but it's really, really complex because, well, if you have all these devices that you usually use in the laboratory where you have everything under control, people do not move. Yes, we did both. And you just have to look at the screen. That is very different from going through a winery and walking up and down, and it were not very active people. We had old people going and they were quite calm, but then there's some noise coming from somewhere and everything is noise, yes, just moving, and it's really complicated. So this type of technique needs a lot of improvement to be valuable for us. So probably we even thought of having people drink and then it would even be probably worse. So we did not do that. We just had people moving through the winery slowly, and also in the outside. It was difficult, and we still do not have the perfect results from that. But it's difficult. I would not really recommend it, unfortunately. Perhaps there are better materials. I'm not sure. I'm not so specialized in this.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Elisabeth. Thank you all for the interesting contribution and participation. It was a pleasure. And now we can end the session and go have lunch. So see you in the afternoon. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.